Well, the Blues won, but unfortunately, we're a Cardinals podcast. So we're going to talk about that game first. Busy night in downtown St. Louis as the Cardinals get thumped by the Mets. All coming up on B-Schaeff Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It's now past 1 a.m. on Saturday, May 3rd, 2025. I was out at Enterprise Center on Friday night. The Blues victorious in Game 6 over the Jets to set up Game 7. But we're going to talk Cardinals first because I know that's what most people are coming to this channel for. It's Brenden Schaeffer, St. Louis Cardinals writer. So let's get into the ugly defeat to the hands of the New York Mets. 9-3, Cardinals lose. Sonny Gray didn't have his best start, was laboring throughout this one and unable to get through the fifth inning as it ended up. And you had some moments that you'd rather forget if you're the Cardinals. Willson Contreras, you know what? He has been giving the Cardinals a really solid option at first base defensively. I think I have largely been impressed with what we've seen defensively from Willson, changing positions from catcher to first baseman this year. And until tonight, I would have said, without really a hitch at all, anywhere in the showing for him on the diamond. But there was a play tonight that came back to haunt the Cardinals as Willson Contreras was unable to scoop the back end of that double play in the fifth inning, and the ball skirts away from him, and there's just kind of a brain fart there by Willson as the ball squirts away a dozen feet or so and another run coming around to score. That was not a bright moment, not the one you wanted to see from Willson Contreras, but I do want to make sure I mention first off that, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, it seemed like he's been pretty good defensively at first. Like, think about what you expected it to be coming in and what it has been. I think he's exceeded expectations. But obviously tonight in a key spot with Chris Roycroft having relieved Sonny Gray, Cardinals really could have used that double play ball to get them out of the jam there in the fifth inning, and he just was not able to deliver. And then to not be on top of it and recognize that he didn't catch it. Like I said, I think a brain fart is probably the word that comes to mind. Just kind of stood there, and that allowed the next run to come around to score. That gave the Mets a 5-3 lead, and it kind of took the wind out of the sails of the Cardinals, I felt like, in the middle of that game. It was some back-and-forth action. Pete Alonso got the better of Sonny Gray with a two-run homer to center field. That was a spot where, the Cardinals had to claw back and regain the lead, and you felt like things were pretty good at 3-2. And then when Alonso gets his big swing, that was kind of the jump starter. You always hate when there's an inning where a team gets the home run. It was a two-run shot, as I mentioned, by Alonso. But then the home run doesn't become the rally killer. It almost kind of jump starts an offense. And that's sort of what happened to the Cardinals there in the top of the fifth inning. The Mets end up with 4 runs scoring in that frame. The Alonso two-run homer didn't end up stomping out the rest of the rally because the Mets were able to start another one, and it continued against Chris Roycroft. And by virtue of that tough error on Willson Contreras, I assume he got labeled with the error. Yeah, it was a missed catch error all the way. That's a double play that's got to get Roycroft out of the inning, and it didn't. And the Cardinals didn't score any more runs, didn't tack on from there, and so the bullpen coughing up a couple more later is what it is. Ryan Helsley actually has to come into this game, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I understand it. That's when you know things are bad. I mean, Oli Marmol has insisted, and again, we'd have to go back a couple of weeks at this point to remember what we're talking about, but insisted that there was a spot in that Mets series on the road in Queens where you don't bring Helsley in because you got to save him for when there's a save situation. Well, there just haven't been very many save situations since then, and I think in conjunction with that, you've gotten a version of Ryan Helsley that has not been particularly sharp. So gives up a run tonight. It's just a spot where they had to get him into a game, and that's unfortunate because it was an 8-3 game when he comes in. And I was walking down to the elevator in the Blues press box, and I was walking by the TV, and I saw Ryan Helsley on the field, and I said, well, that's not good because he doesn't belong there in an 8-3 game, but it's gone so long that you needed to use him. And that's where it's like it's impossible to anticipate thinking back to a couple of weeks ago that you may not have very many save chances coming up and that you might as well use Helsley when the game's on the line. But I still maintain, and I know that Ollie Marmol disagrees, but I look back at that spot and think, and this is revisionist history, right? Hindsight's always going to be 20/20. You didn't know at that moment in time that the next 2 weeks weren't going to see very many opportunities for Helsley to see the field in save chances. And then, of course, one of the few that he did get onto the field for on the last homestand for the Cardinals, he blew the save. That was the game that Nolan Arenado hit the walk-off home run. But it's just one of those where you look back and go, man, they haven't gotten the most out of him, and now you're starting to wonder if that's part of the reason that maybe he's looking a little bit rusty, a little bit off with his command on the mound. And it just feels like if they had it to do over again, I wonder would they change their mind? And I think Oliver Marmol would say no, because he was insistent that that's just not a spot you can bring Ryan Helsley into. A couple of weeks ago, Friday night, I believe it was, when Ryan Fernandez gave up the home run to Francisco Lindor, which was in the midst of that Mets series where the Cardinals were swept in 4. They've now lost 5 in a row this season to the New York Mets after Friday night's defeat. And I believe I heard on the radio driving home, 9 in a row dating back to last year that the Cardinals have dropped to the Mets, which is the longest consecutive win streak in the history of the Mets-Cardinals series, going back to, decades and decades of these matchups taking place. The Mets right now own the Cardinals, unfortunately, and the good news is we're the jinx. We're talking about this in the middle of the series with still 2 games yet to be played later on this weekend, as the Cardinals and Mets will be back at it at Busch Stadium on Saturday afternoon. And maybe the fact that we're talking about this means that the 1:15 date between the Cards and Mets on Saturday between Eric Fedde and Tyler McGill, maybe that's one that'll benefit the Cardinals. The Mets have now named a starting pitcher or a probable starter for Sunday. Tidwell is their guy, and it looks like he'll be making his season debut. I can't claim to know much about him. Is it a major league debut for Blade Tidwell? That is one heck of a nickname, Mr. Tidwell, who has a little bit of experience at AAA so far this season. 5 ERA for him and 6 starts on the year, but we've never seen Blade Tidwell in the big leagues. So another pitcher, I believe it'll be the second time in a week that the Cardinals will see a major league debut on the mound against them, as they roughed up Chase Petty the other night on Wednesday. So maybe this is one where the Cardinals are able to, on Sunday, get the better of Blade Tidwell. I just keep saying his name because it's kind of a cool name. So we'll see if he pitches cool on the mound at Busch Stadium on Sunday. But it's just been, things have just been a touch off for the Cardinals at this point, and they're falling even further below 500. You hope that this doesn't become a series that ends up with the Cardinals on the losing end, because they had been so good at home. They dropped the opener in this one. It's just a yucky feeling when Helsley has to pitch, because what's going to happen tomorrow is like, all right, you're up 4-3 going into the 9th. Of course, you got to throw Helsley on that back-to-back, right? But then is he available for Sunday? Well, no, because he pitched in a game that they just had to get him some work. That's why, for me, if there's ever a spot, and again, you can't anticipate it, but if there's going to be a spot in the season, and it's happened twice now in the past week or so, where Helsley comes into a game simply to get him work, you have to open your mind and expand your horizons to potentially be able to use him in tie games on the road, even though it's not a safe situation. I know you can't go back and change it, and like I said, maybe Ollie Marmol wouldn't. He would say, look, that's just not something you can do. You can't anticipate that your team's not going to have save chances for your closer over the following couple of weeks. But I just don't like seeing Ryan Helsley into an 8-3 game. Understood why it had to happen. It's just one of those deals where it's part of the arrangement, right? Because he's got to pitch in the 9th inning. He's not going to be a multi-inning guy where he's going to show up in the most high leverage spot, right? That's part of the business of this, I think, too, where you're just not going to see that with Ryan Helsley. So I know I'm harping on the Helsley thing a little bit in this episode, but it's just one where you see it twice in a week. It's just kind of indicative, I think, of where the Cardinals are at right now, and that's now a couple of games in a row in which Helsley has pitched and allowed at least an earned run. Of course, the 2-run homer against the Brewers on April the 26th. That's the last time we saw him, though, and that's been about a week ago at this point for the Cardinals. So rough going there. We'll see what they're able to look like in the next one. Sonny Gray, not able to get through 5. He got roughed up. 6 total runs, 4 of them earned. We talked about the error that was made, but 9 hits, 3 walks. Very uncharacteristic outing for Sonny Gray. Just not strong. 6 strikeouts. You still see that even in the rough games for him, it seems, but couldn't get through the 5th inning. Everybody who came in was kind of tagged, other than technically Roycroft didn't give up any earned runs of his own, but had that double play where he was on the field. The double play didn't happen from Contreras, but King gave up a run. Munoz gave up a run in a couple of innings, and Helsley, of course, gave one up late. So the trend where the bullpen had gone from the Wednesday in Atlanta to finishing up the Wednesday against Cincinnati without giving up a run outside of the Ryan Helsley home run that he gave up against the Brewers in the game that the Cardinals won on the 26th of April. Suddenly that trend is gone as well, where the bullpen got roughed up on Thursday, and now it happens a little bit in this game Friday. But you're starting to see that trend too, where we're talking about these games and you go, the Cardinals kind of lost the wind of their sails when it comes to the offense and didn't muster anything down the stretch. The Cardinals score a run in the first inning. Nootbaar gets things going with a double and steals third base. It seemed to me like, okay, they might have something on Clay Holmes where they're going to try to really run on him tonight. Seemed like that was going to be an emphasis, but then Mason Wynn, who was able to beat out the play at first base to drive in the run of Nootbaar, he tries to steal second, and that didn't go nearly as well. So that was kind of the beginning and the end, I guess, of figuring out if they were going to very, very well be able to get some bases off of Clay Holmes, who gave up a bunch of hits in this one. And Victor Scott, by the way, did also steal a base off of Holmes. So I think that was something intentional. We'll see if that's more about the pitcher, because we won't see him again, or the catcher, Francisco Alvarez, the catcher for the Mets. Sometimes it seems like the Cardinals will try to pick on certain catchers in series, and we might see it from the very jump of a series. We'll see what the Cardinals decide to do in this one, if they can get enough guys on base to try to wreak some havoc. But Holmes ended up going 6 innings, gave up the 8 hits, but only 3 runs. Not a big strikeout game for him, so you can at least credit the Cardinals for only striking out 5 times in this game. But Clay Holmes improving to 4-1 on the season. His ERA is still below 3 in a quality start for him. Cardinals offensively just could not really get a lot else going. Mason Wynn had a good game, 3 for 4, still looking very good in that number 2 hole for the Cardinals, and he scored a run, drove one in as well. Willson Contreras, he's got that OPS just under 650. It's sitting at 648 after a 2-hit game for him, and the Cardinals were able to scatter a few other hits as well. Victor Scott, Alec Burleson, Brendan Donovan, and of course we talked about Lars Nootbaar's double, accounting for the 9 hits for the Cardinals tonight, just 1 walk, and pretty quiet game again when it comes to that offense. They have been rather hot cold recently, and you had really just one day where the offense was kind of humming, and even within that day you saw vast stretches of game where the Cardinals didn't do much offensively. In game 1 on Wednesday, Cardinals scored that run in the first, and they took until the rest of the game, the 9th inning, they put up a 5 spot. And then game 2 had things going against the Reds early, but remember it was 20 or 23 or so batters in a row. I still don't know the number. I know it was 20, and then they ended up not scoring any more runs, so I don't remember if it ended that way specifically. But 20-some-odd batters in a row, came to the plate in the night game Wednesday after the Cardinals had built up that 9-0 lead, and they did squat. So you're coming into this series thinking, all right, Cardinals have played well at home, but certainly did not get the job done tonight. And again, a game marked by a little bit of the lack of crispness. I think Contreras is going to be fine. He'll get the next one. It just happened to be a costly spot. And poor Roycroft, it seems like every time he gets a ground ball that's supposed to be a double play, not able to get it done on Contreras' count today. And I'm thinking back to last year at Wrigley when he was really responsible for not really fielding his position. And it just seemed like he gets those soft ground balls. He gets that contact that the Cardinals are looking for, but not able to get the result that they were looking for. And like I said, from there, when it was 6-3 at that point to end the 5th inning, just felt like the wind was maybe out of the sails for the Cardinals offensively, as the Mets pile up 17 hits in this game against Cardinal pitching, and more where that came from. Look, this whole thing with the Mets, it could just be that the Mets are that good. Like right now, I think you're going to see an NLCS of Dodgers-Mets, and it's going to be a friggin' awesome series, because those two teams, probably the 2 best teams in baseball, in my opinion. I think whichever NL team emerges from this gauntlet is going to be your world champion in 2025. The Dodgers would be the obvious pick from at the beginning of the year. But the Mets should not be discounted, especially if this rotation ends up holding up because they have some dudes at the top of this lineup, and tonight was an example where you're starting to see some others contribute. We talked in the last time the Cardinals faced the Mets how Lindor, Soto, Alonso as a 1, 2, 3 in the order is one of the best in baseball in terms of a top three in the batting lineup, but I think especially relative to the 4 through 9 that the Mets bring to the table, it's even more of a glaring achieving unit because I just don't think that 4 through 9 for the Mets is particularly strong, and statistically that kind of matches what we're seeing. But tonight, a guy like Brandon Nimmo really gets going, 3 for 3, walked, scored 3 runs, walked twice, I should say. So he was on base 5 times, and that alone gets his OPS up to 720. Jesse Winker had a 2 for 3 game, his OPS up to 734. So, like, if those guys at the 4 and the 5 spots start to fill in, and Starling Marte has been, kind of rough to begin, we'll see if he gets things going. A guy like Vientos has some raw pop in his bat, but hasn't shown it enough. Stuff like that. We'll see if they end up with a group. Jeff McNeil actually playing center field tonight, which is a little bit strange, but he's had a pretty good start to the season. We start to see Luis Angel Acuna, Francisco Alvarez. He had a big game, 3 for 5, 3 runs driven in. So, like, suddenly, one big game with the Mets pile up 17 hits, and that 4 through 9 looks a lot more menacing than it did probably 2 weeks ago when we were looking at the numbers for some of those guys. But still would say Lindor, Soto, Alonso is really tough. And it's so funny to me that the Mets like barely wanted Alonso back. The entire winter was seeming like he would end up somewhere else, and almost like begrudgingly they brought him back. That dude, and that's what's kind of frustrating. Like, I'm not saying the Cardinals ever would have signed him, and obviously they made the plan to move Contreras to first base. But when there's a player like that out there in the market who all he does is rake, and it's whatever you might think about Pete Alonso, like big, strong guy, all those kind of the run-ins with the Cardinals over the years, be that as it may, how were there not other teams that were like rushing to sign this guy? And of course, the first baseman the Cardinals let go, we knew he would rebound with the other New York team, the Yankees. Paul Goldschmidt had another home run tonight. He's been one of the best hitters in baseball. Alonso's hitting 345, and his OPS is up to 1,137. He was 2 for 5 tonight, had the home run, the 2-run shot in the 5th. It's just crazy to me that the Mets kind of stumbled back into Pete Alonso because nobody else was willing to sign him to the contract that he wanted. And that's where, like, the market inefficiency is. The fact that every team in baseball was like, yeah, it's fine, Mets, just take him. And Alonso has no other choice. He'll just sign with him for whatever they'll give him because that's where he's going to go be. I just can't believe that no team was willing to. He said, well, he's a first baseman. He doesn't bring as much defensively because of the positional value. He's one of the best hitters in baseball. I just don't get it. But anyway, the Mets benefit, and just think about that Mets lineup without him. Like, it just made sense for him to go back there, but ultimately I think he had to take a shorter deal, higher AAV than what he wanted. But I digress. The Mets are really, really good. They're going to be problematic again on Saturday, and we'll see. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Eric Fedde does because I maintain, I don't know what the Cardinals' plan is. I was obviously not there at Busch Stadium tonight to hear if there has been any update on Steven Matz, and right now there's not. I'm just looking at the Cardinals website and their probable pitchers. There's not anything listed yet for that Pittsburgh series as far as whether the Cardinals are going to continue with Steven Matz in the rotation. I'm assuming that they're going to try to maybe thread the needle and make him available out of the bullpen for a game in this series if they end up needing the extra help, which they certainly may end up needing because of the way that things went for Sonny Gray. But I mean, Matz needs to get at least one more start, and if he's better than Fedde, in my opinion, Fedde needs to go to the bullpen, and that's just the part of the deal, right? Like, you're 14-19. I get it that this may not be the Cardinals' year, but for all the patience that they have requested of the fans over the years, and the fans have not really been rewarded over the past 3 years on that. I say 3 years, past 3 seasons, 23, 24, 25. I think when you have a situation that it's not detrimental to the development of a player, where you're talking about, like in the case of Thomas Ajayci, we know the drill. We know that Gorman's got to play. We know that Burleson. We know that Walker. We know that some of those guys who have been around a little bit longer than Ajayci, this 2025 season is about figuring out what they are, and that's fine. But that's not really the argument between Fedde or Matz. You just need to have the best guy be the starter. And you might say, well, Matz is better in the bullpen. I honestly don't care. I'm never going to say that a guy should be serving in a middle relief role because he fits that role better when he's also shown that he fits the starting role well. Because I want the best 5 starters, or 6, in the event that you roll with a 6-man rotation. because a good starting pitcher will forever and ever and ever be more valuable to an MLB team than a good middle reliever or a good lefty reliever or even a good closer. I mean, a solid, sturdy number 2 in a rotation is always going to be more valuable than the most valuable closer in baseball even. It's just night and day. You're talking about a guy that's going to throw 60, 70 innings versus a guy that's going to throw, 170, 180 if things are going well, maybe more. You'll never convince me that if there's a guy that's showing the signs that he can handle and thrive in a rotation spot, that he should be bumped to the bullpen for I don't care about team need. I don't care about any of it. Matt should be in over Fetty if we don't see a good version of Fetty on Saturday, and if Matt shoves again in his next chance. Like, you can't really tell me that Steven Matz is getting a legit look after a really good spring, and then he pitches on April the 16th in a starting role. He pitches on April the 30th in a starting role. The Cardinals don't give him another look at that. I think that they have probably not been aggressive enough at identifying and getting a look at Steven Matz because, I think he's got a chance to get more, to be in a position to get you more at the deadline than even Eric Fetty might, because first, he's left-handed. Secondly, his stuff just looks better at this point to me than Eric Fetty. I think Fetty can still end up with good numbers, but he was kind of doing it with a little bit of batted ball luck, whereas Steven Matz, I think, has some strikeout stuff. He looks just about as good as he's ever looked with the Cardinals. It's been a small sample because he hasn't started very many games, but in my opinion, I want to see that play out. I'm not rooting against Eric Fetty to have a good start Saturday. Love to see him do well, and then maybe we can quell this conversation. But if he struggles again, or if it's more of a mediocre outing and a lot of hard batted ball contact, like, should be looking beyond the under the hood a little bit, beyond the box score, to determine what you're seeing out of Fetty versus what you're seeing out of Matz. And to me, that should be the decision when it comes to bumping this rotation back down to 5 when you get to May the 8th, because that's your Thursday off day next week. Just my 2 cents on that, but Cardinals fans, let me know what you think in the comments as we move along here. We'll talk a little bit of Blues. I do want to get into the Blues game on this podcast just because I won't have any other avenue on my channel to do so. I'm not going to have time probably to make a Blues-specific video, but something else that we're going to do while we're still talking baseball, as we always like to do, talking about the minors, let's go down on the farm. It's time to go down on the farm. Brought to you by Hastings Layers Premium Eggs.
You'll be happier than a jackass eating thistle.
Huh? Memphis Redbirds had a nice game on Friday with a 5-1 win over the Louisville Bats, still hosting that series in Memphis. Ivan Herrera continues to rake 2 for 3 in his rehab stint on Friday, and of course he was due to catch 5 innings. I have no reason to believe that didn't take place. He was lifted for Jimmy Crooks a little bit later on in that game. Good to see the bat flowing for Ivan Herrera. I believe I said the score, 5-1. The Memphis Redbirds win that one. Matt Koperniak with his second home run of the season. Good stuff there to see from Memphis, and good stuff in particular to see from Ivan Herrera. 29-year-old Curtis Taylor was the starting pitcher for the Memphis Redbirds, and he's pitched a little bit down there this year, 23 innings, and has a 2.70 ERA. So, again, they're kind of searching for who's going to be able to fill out that rotation right now. And maybe some of the guys from AA could eventually see their way to AAA, get those promotions during the year. But some of them that you have high hopes for have also been struggling with their numbers down in AA, including Max Rajic, who took the loss for the Springfield Cardinals on Friday. 3-2, they fell to the Naturals as the Cardinals host that in Springfield. 5 innings, 3 runs, 2 of them earned, so not a brutal day by any means for Max Rajic, but he drops to 1-3 on the season. Gave up 5 hits, a walk, and only was 3 strikeouts in the 5 innings of work that he held in this game. 6.86 the ERA that we see for Rajic. So more on the line of like Tekoa Roby as one of the guys that you might eventually see bumped up. Bryson Motts we could see at some point, probably not right away. Those guys are going to work at AA for a little while, but Roby certainly a guy that I'll be keeping an eye on. We did see J.J. Weatherholt in the lineup playing shortstop in the field, so that is good to see. And by the way, this was part of a doubleheader today for Springfield, so that was one of the games. Weatherholt was 1 for 2, also had a reach base via walk. JJ did not start, it appears, in the other game of that, which the Springfield Cardinals lost 3-1, and it was more of a bullpen game for them, so nothing super notable to come of that one, statistically speaking. No homers or anything there. And so kind of a rough day for the offense for the Springfield Cardinals, but not a bad day for their pitching despite losing 3-2 and 3-1 in those games. So that's what's going on down on the farm. I've gotten some comments, people talking about, well, different things with some players to make note of at places like Palm Beach and Peoria. As the summer goes along, I definitely would love to get a little bit more of insights out on those levels as well, in addition to kind of dealing with Memphis and Springfield right now for down on the farm. But the Blues having their season continuing has definitely eaten up a chunk of my time recently as I've been covering all those home playoff games. So we'll try to get around to expanding down on the farm as we go if people are interested in that. But for tonight, well, it's 1:30 in the morning, so it be what it be at a certain point in the process. Let's talk a little Blues, though. It was a lot of fun at Enterprise Center. 5-2 the win, and Connor Hellebuyck chased from the game for the third straight time at Enterprise Center. All three games in this series, that's what the Blues did to him. If it were soccer on the aggregate, the Blues would be well in hand advancing in this series with the way that they have dominated the home games. And tonight was actually, I believe, the smallest margin of victory in terms of the Blues home games during this series, but it was pretty much as big of a blowout as the others in terms of the way that it felt in the building. The Blues did not start fast tonight. You know, a lot of times we say, I get the fast start, and it's kind of a cliched aspect, but also because it's true, and so that's why we talk about it. But I thought, honestly, for the Blues, they didn't start fast, and ultimately they didn't need to, and I felt like the same thing in Game 4. I didn't really see a fast start for the Blues in that home game at Enterprise Center, but they got the first goal of the game, and it was a very simple way of getting it for Philip Broberg's purposes. Just kind of knuckle the puck and throw it onto the net and see what happens. Well, what happened is Pavel Buchnevich just kind of being a pest, and you had the defenseman for Winnipeg trying to carry him out of the front of the crease because, you know, Buchnevich is there to basically either tip a goal in or screen the goaltender while somebody else fires one from distance. And Buch was able to just be a problem because the defender swiping across at the same moment where the Blues finally got their passing going. It just seemed like they were very tentative in the first period for a while. They weren't crisp with their passing. They weren't quite skating to the puck where they needed it to kind of set up the rhythm passing game, if you will, when in the offensive zone. But this was a sequence where they were able to do that. A nice play by Justin Falk, kind of taking it deep and ultimately able to set up exactly what they needed there. But it was a goal by Philip Broberg where I think a lot of the credit goes to Buchnevich as well for the underrated, just being in the right areas, be willing to go to those dirty areas is what Jim Montgomery is always preaching. And you annoy the opposition enough to where they get a little bit more fixated on you than what's actually going on and what it may cost them, which was the fact that the goaltender, Connor Hellebuyck, was completely screened on the play. Not by Buchnevich, in my opinion. I think it was by his own guy who was trying to move Buch out of the way. And the knuckle puck was honestly struck slowly enough by Philip Broberg that it was probably helpful that it wasn't a very clean shot, kind of a wobbler. Because of the timing of it, it allowed for Hellebuyck to have no idea it was coming. And just the perfect setup with the screen. And the second goal, Nathan Walker was a screen type of goal as well. That was to get the Blues on top 2-1 after Winnipeg had come back. The Winnipeg goal that they did score, there was a couple of power play chances for Winnipeg before they scored. I feel like one or two at least. But the power play they did score on, it was almost like, just give it to them. Just put it in the net because the Blues were weary at that point. They were making some penalties that you don't love to see. I believe that was the slashing call that came against Walker where they went to review it. There was a couple of moments that could have been review-related in this game. That was one where they were looking to see, I don't know whether it was, maybe there should have been an embellishment on the Jets side of it because the guy took a dive. There was literally Jim Montgomery on the bench motioning during the review to show that he took a dive. So that's what Jim Montgomery wanted. I was hearing from the broadcast that they had originally called it a major penalty or were discussing the possibility of reviewing it to be a major penalty. Because while he did take a dive, was there a question of a stick to the face or something? So they reviewed it. They didn't change anything. It remained a minor penalty, and I believe that's the penalty on which the Jets scored within like 10 seconds. Just kind of getting the puck to the net and a tip or rebound is right there, and they clean it up for the goal. And it was just kind of it took the air out of the building. It was one of those where like, oh man, like the Jets had been close, and it felt like one was probably coming, and you commit another penalty that causes it to happen. Initially, the Jets had scored a goal where Justin Falk, it was a brutal play, but he was bailed out by the offsides. I just thought the Falk play that I'm talking about where the Jets scored shortly after, the Falk penalty somehow still stood up. I'm not going to pretend to be something I'm not. I don't know hockey rules well enough to know why the penalty stood up, even though they eventually ruled that the goal didn't count due to being offsides on the play. So maybe some of the more seasoned hockey folks in the comments, if anyone's out there, can say exactly why that was. I kind of equated it in my head to like in the NFL, there can be a play that gets negated on replay, but maybe at the end of it, there was an unsportsmanlike conduct foul that occurred. Like that foul still occurs even if they wipe the original play off, even though that's kind of you're talking about extracurriculars in that, which is not an exact comparison to the hockey play, but the Falk penalty, he was a hooking call after he had basically the Jets turned over the puck. Falk had it and he's got it cleanly, and all he's got to do is either skate around with it a little bit to make sure his guys have a chance to get into position, or if they're making a change or whatever they need to do, or pass it, take a moment, take a beat, and pass it to somebody down the way that's going to be able to set up something offensively. But the pass was errant, and the guy that he had, I believe, just basically taken it from, took it right back, and luckily he wasn't quite in the offensive zone when that happened, so he skated it into the zone, and a fellow Jet was already offside. So the goal didn't end up counting, but that's what got the Jets one of their power plays before they ultimately scored. The Blues challenged it rightfully. It was easy to overturn. He was offsides by, some of those where you got to kind of look at the line and see the skate, wasn't remotely close. He was several feet offsides. And so it's kind of a wonder they didn't catch that live. I think it's basically because of how chaotic and not good is my analysis the play by Falk was to cough that puck up where he did. And then to, make one mistake and have it turn into two by committing the hooking penalty to try to avoid getting scored on there. But it wouldn't have counted anyway, so it's kind of a bummer that the Blues had to go on the penalty kill. But they were able to kill that one off, and then the next one, I think, was when the Jets, or it might have been two after that, the Jets got one. And then it took a little bit of time to the Blues to try to find their game in the second period. Again, I think there's something to be said for the fact that they didn't start hot, but they were able to find their game. And when they did, it's just like the floodgates open against Hellebuck. You had the dirty goal by Broberg where you're getting dirty in front of the net with Busch, and then you had the Nathan Walker goal, which was kind of a very similar situation where I believe he might have tipped that one in. I'd have to go back and rewatch it. A lot of things happening at once. But then it was the third goal of the game for the Blues that made it 3-1. Nice passing by Binnington to set up this sequence. But when you get one-on-one with Schenn, you're like, all right, this is a nice little play. You want to throw pucks on net, absolutely, because you want to see what Hellebuck is made of. But when there's a defender on Schenn, it's not like it was a breakaway. Felt like that was going to be probably an easy one for Hellebuck to stop, and that was where, when Schenn scored that goal, and it was a great shot, don't take anything away from him, but that was where I said, all right, they're clear. They like this notion of, are they in Hellebuck's head? Are they under his skin? The fans are chanting Connor because they're obviously trying to get involved in seeing the Blues have another onslaught against the Vezina finalist. For him not to save that puck, I thought that was where I was sold on, yep, Hellebuck doesn't have it. If I were Scott Arniel, I would have pulled Hellebuck right then. And I know that's not the way he's going to do it, because he has always insisted throughout this entire series, even as Hellebuck has been struggling, that he's got utmost confidence in him. And after the game tonight, he said this game was not about Connor tonight. It was about we imploded in front of him, is I believe the quote from the Jets head coach. But I think it's both. I think that Schenn goal is not imploding in front of him. I mean, sure, you didn't have enough guys back, and it was a one-on-one chance for Schenn to be able to skate down and do something with the puck. But when there's still a guy kind of, face up with Brenden Schenn, you should be able to know there are only so many areas of the net that he's going to be able to target with that shot because he's got a guy on his left shoulder following him all the way down and kind of cutting him off from being able to shoot to the opposite side of the net. So I just thought it was a moment where that one was on Hellebuck, and from there, whether the next goals were or if they were on the Jets imploding in front of him, as Scott Arniel would claim, it doesn't really matter at that point. Once the onslaught is on, it's on everybody. The whole team is on their heels. The Jets, skaters, and their goaltender on their heels, and the Blues just kept piling on. It was a sight to behold. It was surreal to see it happen again. 4 goals in the second period alone, and you don't see Connor Hellebuck return for the third. As Eric Comrie came in, Blues still haven't scored on him in the series, I don't believe. It seems like every time Hellebuck comes out, the Blues have already done their damage. But they're not going to see him. They're going to see Connor Hellebuck in Game 7 on Sunday night in Winnipeg. It just comes down to, can the Blues turn what they have found with this momentum and this style of play and the defensemen getting involved in the offense? Just everything that we have seen has been brilliant. The fourth line was unbelievable on Friday night. I believe they were a +9, according to Ethan Hannaford gave me that stat sitting next to me, and we did the post-game show with Sports Hub STL. If you didn't get enough hockey talk from b-schaeff Daily, it was like almost a 2-hour show, I think, by the time it was all said and done, with Jacob and Thomas and Ethan and me on Sports Hub STL for the Blues post-game. Unbelievable time. The comments were incredible. The interaction was amazing. But if you want more of that, that's where you get it. But the fourth line was fantastic. Cam Fowler, I believe, tying a Blues record for points by a defenseman in a playoff series. So just some unbelievable stuff that the Blues were doing tonight, and it was coming from those kind of the grit guys, the glue guys, the defense getting involved in the offense, and the WTF line, as they call that group, with Walker, Toropchenko, and Faxa. Just some really good stuff that we saw from those guys tonight. Can they extend it into Winnipeg and play that same way? Because you're not going to chase Connor Hellebuck in his own building. It's not going to be that same vibe. He can get rattled, but I don't think it's going to be quite to the same extent. That crowd in a Game 7, you're not going to like this notion that, you can get up a couple of goals early and you can take the crowd out of it. That's not going to happen. We talked on the post game, my prediction for Game 7, and before Game 6, I wouldn't have picked the Blues, and I said I do reserve the right to change it based on how Game 6 unfolds. I did pick the Blues to win 6. They did, and they did it in again, just a bullying type of fashion, which tells me that, like, you get to Game 7, it's all on the line. It's all on the table. Enough is enough. Like, you don't have to go in there with something to fear. I think if anybody's got anything to fear, it should be the Jets for squandering a President's Trophy season, and they've got to play a Game 7 on their home ice just to advance beyond the pesky Blues. Like, the Blues are the team with all the momentum. I know that hasn't necessarily served them well yet in this series, going from game to game and the travel involved in that. You do get to turn around and play 2 nights later, though. Like, that's, in terms of momentum, that's an advantage that maybe the Blues didn't have previously, because I think the last time when you went between games 4 and 5, I believe there were 3 days in between, right? They played Sunday and then they played Wednesday night. So really more like 3.5, because that was Sunday at noon for Game 4, and then Game 5 was Wednesday. It was that 8:30 puck drop in Central Time. So this is going to be a lot tighter of a turnaround. I think that benefits the Blues. Scheifele obviously didn't travel for this game. If they don't have him in Game 7, like the Jets brought Ehlers back after they had ruled him out of the series, there's some desperation decisions being made on the Winnipeg side, and it didn't work. Like, if you're trying to avoid the series, you're going to bring somebody back who is still playing hurt, but you're just going to put him back in the lineup because you're trying to avoid the drop-off without Scheifele. Like, they were able to get by without Scheifele in the middle of Game 5 as it happened, because I think you lose a player to injury during that game, and he's a emotional leader for your team, an assistant captain. What happens? Everybody's going to rally. But then that adrenaline wears off, and you have to go get up and do it again when you know that guy's not on the plane to St. Louis. They weren't able to do that. So we'll see what their personnel looks like for Game 7, but it's just a matter of the Blues got to stay with their game and avoid stupid penalties, because I think even in a moment where I said the crowd's not going to get out of it in Game 7, the Blues could go up 1-0, they could go up 2-1, something like that. You're not going to take the crowd out of it. And the way to the crowd could maybe be laying dormant there below the surface, right? Ready to explode. Don't give them those cheeky, easy penalties that put the best power play in the league at a man advantage. That's going to be key for the Blues in Game 7. We'll see if I get a chance. Maybe I will Saturday or Sunday during the day to talk more Blues, but with all the Cardinals going on, with everything going on this weekend in St. Louis, probably this will be the last to hear from me on hockey, but let me know if you're interested in more. Very impressive what we've seen for the Blues. Unfortunately, the way it boils down is you had to fire your coach to get the coach that you wanted, Jim Montgomery, and the way things were going at that point in the season, the Blues, had a hole to climb out of, and ultimately they did so to where they've been the better team in the series against the Jets through 6 games. They've been better. They have outplayed the President's Trophy winning club through 6 games. The problem with that is you still have to go to their place to win the 7th one. You have to be the team that wins on the road. When you play the President's Trophy winner, they have the luxury of, we played well enough this season that we don't have to win in your barn, but you got to win in ours. So whether the Blues can ultimately do that is going to decide whether the season continues. But folks, if it somehow does, I'm telling you, I think this Blues team's got a run in them. And if I'm the Stars or the Avs, I'm quaking in my boots about what facing the Blues could be. If I'm the Stars or the Avs, they got to worry about each other. They got to worry about their own Game 7. But if I'm either of those teams, man, I would much rather see the Winnipeg Jets than the St. Louis Blues in the second round with the way the Blues are playing. And I don't know if Dylan Holloway's coming back, right? They've labeled him week to week, but that's been a month ago, it seems, that label was on his name. So we'll see on that. But it feels like the Blues have finally, over the course of this series, they figured out what it looks like to play without Holloway at the utmost of their capacity. And if they get by the Jets, I think anything goes. I think all bets are off. So cannot wait for Sunday night. It's gonna be a lot of fun. So let me know, Cardinals fans, what you think. Let me know, Blues fans, what you think. But I got to get out of here. It's almost 2 a.m. Appreciate you guys for sticking with me. This has been B-Schaeff Daily. We'll talk to you next time on the show. Peace.